Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode on the High on Data podcast. I'm Krishnan Venkata, Chief Client Officer at Latent View Analytics, and Jacqueline Woods, Chief Marketing Officer of Teradata, is joining us as our guest today. Teradata is a global leader in cloud based analytics and enterprise data management. With solutions spanning data warehousing, AI, ML enablement, and strategic consulting, Teradata supports industries like finance, healthcare, retail, and telecommunications in driving innovation and optimizing performance. Jacqueline leads the company's strategic marketing initiatives, including brand management, digital and social marketing, and customer engagement. With over 30 years of experience, she has held senior roles at leading technology firms such as IBM, Nielsen, Oracle, and General Electric, specializing in cloud, AI, and SaaS strategies. Welcome to the Higher Data podcast, Jacqueline. We are very happy to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
According to the 2025 Stanford AI Index report in 2024, US private AI investment has grown to over $100 billion. Generative AI saw strong momentum, attracting $34 billion in private investment. AI business usage is also accelerating. A lot of organizations, over 75% of them, have been reported using AI in 2024. Agentic AI, capable of autonomous decision making and task execution, is also emerging as a key area of innovation. Now, all of this is great, but the true power of these technologies depends on having a strong, reliable data foundation. Without clean, well managed data, even the most advanced AI models can fall short of delivering value. On this note, Jacqueline, how do you think companies like Teradata are enabling AI through strong data infrastructure?
Thanks for the question. First, I would state that our belief at Teradata is that we believe people thrive when they're empowered with trusted data and trusted AI. So I think you have to at least start with the position that in order for you to do anything with AI, it has to be from trusted sources, and you have to have a trusted source of information. So that's critical. And I would also state that trusted data and AI are not new to Teradata. They are core attributes of both our company and of our technology. And so I like to use an analogy of water. Many times in the past, people have talked about data is like oil. Data is because it's rich and it's one fairly expensive, and really important to kind of drive energy. But I say that data is more like water. When you think about this planet that we call Earth is comprised of about 70% water. But when you really delve into it, all that water is not usable. You can't use it for things that humans can that need water for, which is to live. And when you look at what is actually usable, it is approximately 0.3%.
Yeah.
So just think about that. Think about how much water there is, and then think about what can you really use. And I would argue that data is very similar to that. Just the amount of data and information and the amount of information and data that's out there that's doubling really probably at this point every 6 months, it's almost unfathomable. But there's a lot of data that's duplicated. And so even when data is duplicated, it means that the data may be doubling, but what's doubling is data that's already out there. If you think about your own organizations and the information that you rely on and need to make business decisions, it is critical that you start from a place of having pristine data. Now, everyone has said from the beginning of time, bad information in, bad information out. That has never been more important at this time. Because remember, when you think about AI, it is information that is learned, patterns that are learned. And if it's using bad data, then the patterns that you get out of that information will be not the patterns that you want to rely upon. So, first and foremost, it's not just do we need a strong infrastructure? Do we need a strong data platform? Do we need a way and a mechanism to ensure that what we're looking at is pristine, clean, and unpolluted? It is mandatory in today's environment.
No, that's a great point, Jacqueline, and I love the analogy to water and the way you talked about it, which is usable water, and it's a fraction, and data, for that matter, only a fraction of it is usable. I think this is where I would want to even probe a bit more on one point. At Latent View, we have built Gen AI readiness roadmaps, basically to guide clients from vision to implementation, right? So we want clients to understand what data they have, what usable data that they have, and what can they use to drive the best impact, which is what a Gen AI readiness roadmap does. Do you think such frameworks are important, and what does Teradata follow from a Gen AI adoption approach for a successful Gen AI adoption for clients?
First of all, yes, I do think that frameworks are important and I think that they're critical. And what a framework does, it gives you, kind of guideposts to kind of one, how to get started, how to think about a problem, and then how to approach it. So you must have that kind of framework in order to get started. You also have to have a plan. So a framework is just structure to how you build a plan. And I think frameworks are important because they help you think about things that you may not have thought about, but are important and critical to your success. I mean, just even um, things like the what I would call the um, process management or the change management component of these journeys is as equally important as to the technology itself. If you don't understand and build in that change management and buy in from the beginning, it's very hard for these technologies to take adoption and to really take hold, even if they may be the best idea since sliced bread. You have to have people bought into the journey that you're on. Change management is a very big part of that journey. And so melding the conversations on why is this technology important and how is it going to drive the type of outcomes that we want are critical to helping one utilize that framework and then building a plan on as a part of the output from the framework.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, actually. And I love the point on change management, and we'll go into that in a bit. Before we go to that, I wanted to understand from your perspective what foundational elements from a data perspective are important for a company to think about for implementing Gen AI.
I think the first thing you have to understand is what do you want to use Gen AI for? When we first were introduced in late 2023 with, kind of I would call it the more formal launch of Chat GPT, then that was the first time where people thought, when I say commercially or democratized access, that was kind of the first time that we had
Oh,
this real democratized access where anyone could type in, I want to know the year George Washington was born. I'm sure you could get that on Google as well, but it's going to give you a whole thing about like his life, his this, his that, all of those things coming together in a much more structured in a way that tells a story, which is different than just kind of what pops up in Google when you just do a search. And so that was the first time people saw, I think, the power of what a large language model is and the type of data and information that you can get from a large language model. So there is that, like, what do I need to be trying to understand when I'm implementing any type of generative AI in my environment? What is the specific need that the customer or the enterprise had? What is the business problem that I'm trying to solve? And I always say, very clearly that I'm not a believer in AI, Gen AI, agentic AI for the sake of all three of those things. I
Right.
think that you have to really understand what is the specific use case that you believe that you're going to get business value from. And when you're able to understand that, then you're going to have a better chance of being successful. I think that one of the foundational elements is going to be transparency, it's going to be security, it's going to be compliance. Those are all things that you're going to have in place. You're going to have to
Yeah.
understand the data lineage. Where is this data coming from? Where is it actually being sourced from its core? And that goes, doubly for things that are inside your enterprise and information that you may be bringing in that's unstructured from outside of your enterprise. All of those things are going to help you to be successful with more transparency, accuracy, and understanding of that core data. And you should think of that core data as really your golden records. And you're going to build on those golden records. You're going to be able to understand and discover the patterns that are going to help you make the better business decision and choices that you need to in your business.
No, that's actually a great point in terms of what you need from setting up your data. We are increasingly seeing companies adopting AI, right? Now, within organizations, not all departments are equal, and there are certain departments that are leading the AI adoption. In your experience, working with multiple leaders in the industry, which are those departments that are leading this AI adoption, and what are the common challenges that they face when adopting AI?
What I've seen is there's three or four, I think, core areas that are one, embracing generative AI and agentic AI, and probably more specifically than others have done so. One is marketing, one is just overall finance, one is also what I would call FinOps, financial operations, and then I would also say in some specific manufacturing areas and operations, you'll see the adoption of AI in a very specific way. So let me start with marketing and give a use case for marketing because I think it's important to give an example. Even when we look at our own selling model and our own sales motion, we use our own product to look at how do we understand propensity, who is out there on the web, what are they doing. We do our own analysis of understanding what people are looking at and what is their propensity to buy, and then we do an analysis on propensity with our own data. What have our customers already done, and what are they likely to do in the future? And you can understand those patterns through one AI very specifically because it's now you're talking about modeling and building your own models and bringing your own models to complement other data that's already out there that's kind of in the realm of kind of, I would say, this data ecosystem that we all live in. And we know that the most important use case at this time from the research that we've done literally over the last 3 years. So we do this study every single year. And what always pops up is yes, our company wants to be more profitable and grow. So let's just assume everybody wants to, sell more and they want to do it profitably. But kind of once you get underneath that kind of overarching goal, it really boils down to how can I do that through better customer engagement? How do I do that with a better customer experience? How do I drive those things with understanding the needs of my specific customers better? So then, if you take an example for us, like American Airlines, and you look at all of the what I would call kind of 28 business processes of American Airlines, you would see that informing someone about a weather delay and its impact to your travel schedule and your flight, then giving them that information early enough to make adjustments in their schedules becomes really important. So sending an alert saying that we expect this kind of weather event, it could impact your travel. Therefore, we're going to let you change your flight to be a flight a day earlier or a day later is really an enhancement to that customer's overall experience, because most people don't want to go to the airport to wait for a couple hours to only see it, well, delayed for a few hours and then ultimately canceled. If they can make a different decision predicated on what the information is coming from, what weather patterns and other things that airlines now have at their disposal in a very meaningful way, that's helpful. Understanding dynamic pricing for an airline is really important. Understanding how to use these, what I would call relationship models that the airlines have, is also really important, because that's why we all belong to someone's program, whether
Right.
out of the core airlines, whether that's Delta, United, or American. We all belong to those programs and we have an affinity for them based on the patterns that they understand about us. And so all companies in many ways are looking for ways to have greater personalization. That's just one example. If you think about how a retail environment has patterns of what have I searched on? What have I bought before? How do I get complementary, what I would call surround, I don't want to call it surround products, but that's probably the best way to say it. If you bought pants and a jacket,
Yeah.
someone's sending you information on other complementary things, shirts, belts, jewelry, shoes. Those are all things that enhance your overall experience as a customer. And so what we're seeing is this overarching greater personalization and efforts to really, quote, show me that you know me. And when a company shows you that they know you, you have a higher propensity to stay with those companies,
Yeah.
period, just full stop. And so those are some of the ways that I think that, we're seeing the adoption of AI.
Great example, especially with the airlines and loyalty. And you brought a great point, which is you have so much information that GenAI is actually making available at the point of decision making, right? So that you can provide a more empathetic response. You can weave in the weather data for the airline, or you can find out customer behavior in a much more accurate fashion. I wanted to also touch upon, you mentioned this when we were talking about the data is increasingly becoming unstructured. What use cases are you seeing around using unstructured data for GenAI adoption?
Well, I think the social platforms are a great way to understand unstructured data, right? Because they are, for all intents and purposes, unstructured information. Lots of videos, lots of images, other places where you may have a lot of PDFs, forms that people have filled out at some point in time, things that have been scanned. Those are all unstructured because a PDF is nothing but really an image, right? Those are all things that are unstructured data that people are referring to, that they can use to inform themselves about needs of customers. There's, especially on TikTok, there are so many things that you say to yourself, I never thought about that. And I think they do actually a decent job of kind of content that you've liked, and serving that up to you. It may be a bit biased, because just because I liked watching furry puppies doesn't mean that that's what I want to see all the time. But certainly, but certainly, I do think when I see more of things that I have liked, I'm like, well, that was pretty cool, and I did like that video, and thanks for sending that to me. But I also want to have an opportunity to kind of look around and see other things that might be of interest to me as well. But to me, those are all things about pattern recognition, and
Right.
what types of patterns am I seeing? And can I use those patterns to understand my business better? Can I use those patterns to understand consumers better? Can I use those patterns to ideate on product innovation? Can I use those patterns to do a better job of serving my customer, to reduce churn, to enhance customer acquisition and the customer experience. Those are all things that I think are at the core of what makes me so excited about Gen AI and agentic AI.
Absolutely. Jacqueline, we talked a lot about use cases. When we speak with organizations, we get asked this, right? Should they begin with use cases or should they begin with a comprehensive data platform? Or should they do both simultaneously? Now, I have an opinion on this. I would love to hear you share your view around what you're seeing in the market and what would you recommend?
I think that it's critical to know what problem that you want to solve and what you're trying to solve. And then you can understand whether you actually have the technology that is needed in order to solve that problem. And because understanding the problem that you need to solve might help you identify which technology is best for you to solve that problem. I think sometimes, people build things and it's kind of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And that was a movie. I don't think that's real life. you
Yeah,
know, I think in real life, what happens is we have these big, hairy, audacious problems that we try to solve, and we need to really think about them deeply and think about what is the ultimate outcome that we need to achieve for our customers, both internal and external. And what's the ultimate outcome that we're trying to deliver to
yeah,
shareholders and employees? And when you think about it in that broad context, that helps you say, this is inherently the problem that I need to solve. And then you ask yourself the question, do I have the technology to solve that problem? And most cases you don't. And then you have to look around and say, what are the pieces that I need to help me solve this problem? But I'd be
absolutely.
curious, what was you said you had an opinion.
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
No, I think you cannot go with building a data platform without thinking about use cases, right? I mean, it's just nobody is going to say that I'm building a 3-year data roadmap and you're going to see the benefits of this at the end of 3 years. Nobody is going to fund that. So I think you need to kind of do this both simultaneously. You need to identify use cases and you need to lay them across your big vision goal. So I think you need to craft the 3-year roadmap and intersperse the use cases in terms of feasibility, in terms of applicability, system maturity. So what our GenAI readiness roadmap does is basically does that. You take all the use cases that the business wants to accomplish, and then you marry that with what can we mature the data foundation into, what are the data sources, what are the different data elements that are there, how do we bring that so that at the end state the data foundation is powering the use cases that is required. So you kind of have to do both, and you cannot say that I'll build the roadmap or cannot just work on use cases and say that I'll do the roadmap later. You kind of have to do both. And it's an interesting thing in terms of prioritization of the use cases, and those axes are what we a lot of our discussions are with clients on.
Agree.
Shifting gears, recently we had heard the IBM CEO saying that AI will not replace programmers anytime soon, right? He thinks that AI will enhance productivity, right? We call this the super programmer, right? Boosting programmers and employers' outputs. Now, the Anthropic CEO has a different take, and he says that in 3 to 6 months, 90% of the coding tasks that is managed today will be done by AI, right? So while some of the roles may shift or even disappear, the bigger story is how is AI going to impact human work? So how do you see AI augmenting human capabilities in this rather than replacing them outright? Or do you see them replacing them outright at all?
I don't see them replacing them outright. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I know Arvind well, and we previously worked together at IBM. So this is someone who I not only know well, but someone who I respect a lot. And I would lean more towards AI as an enhancer of productivity and outputs as compared to a more extreme statement that it's going to replace all coding and all coding will be done by AI. And I do think a lot of coding can be done by AI, but what AI can't do currently is in much of the development process. And I was actually talking to our senior leader in data engineering about this as recently as last week, is there is still the development of technology that is a very collaborative process.
Right.
And so if you're just coding and kind of having things be what I would say done autonomously, that doesn't take into consideration the requirements of people having to talk to each other to have a deeper understanding of the project or the problem or what you're actually trying to solve for. Do I think in the same way that, a manufacturing plant kind of manufactures things when you program it to do certain things? I think those things can be done by AI. And I think over time it can learn to be better and be more efficient. But at the end of the day, someone has to decide, how those things come together by really working across an enterprise. This is, IT is not a monolithic function. It's a function that has to really work across whether it's, human resources or finance or, a division that's responsible for the P&L for a specific type of product. All of those things come into play. And I think one of the reasons why self-service has become such a big thing in IT anyways is because of people feeling that they weren't part of the process to make their environments better when they use technology. That's how we ended up with whether it's Salesforce or some other company that's more SaaS like, because it was a way to, in some ways, disintermediate what happened with core IT.
Right.
So I don't think that all of a sudden, like the machines are going to take over. What I do think is going to happen is that you're going to, in the same way that you've seen other types of democratization in terms of technology, this is going to further democratize technology, but it will enhance the ways that I think we work together going forward as compared to just this mass replacement of people.
Absolutely. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions about AI in the workplace, and I think this is the place where leaders are very critical, right? How do you think that leaders can create a more informed and open environment in workplace? Because there's always this threat of AI taking over jobs, and there is all of this talk that is out there. Can you share some examples that you have heard of and you're seeing in the workplace,
Yeah,
and what
well,
leaders can do?
yeah, I would argue that AI is not a silver bullet. And I think sometimes it's talked about that way because you've cited some studies here already. But if you went to, McKinsey or Deloitte or, PwC and EY, everyone's written a study about the productivity that we expect to
Yep.
gain and all of these things that we expect to happen. So
Yes.
people arguably are somewhat worried about like, what does this mean for my job and what does this mean for me? And I would argue that if you've ever tried to create an image with AI and it didn't turn out exactly how you thought it would be, you would know that you may not just be that easily replaced if you're a designer, because we've all at this point tried that. And I would argue that it's not a silver bullet. It certainly is a time saver and it
Yep.
can help us be more effective. And some of the things that I like to do is, there's times that I quickly write something up and I know that it
Yep.
probably it might have, it's not just typos, just the, phrasing and some of the, is it well written? And it may not sound as positive as I want. And I don't want to be critical. And I may put it in Chat GPT and say, does this sound too stern? And it will come back with a response that, lighten it up by doing X or Y. And so I think those things are time saving as compared to me kind of rereading, rewriting, thinking, and all of those things can be time saving. And I think you need to have a purpose and a plan before you start any AI initiative if you expect it to be successful across enterprise and for that to have lasting and sustainable impact. So you can kind of do these little quick hits and one hit wonders. But to the point that you made earlier about having a framework and looking at it over this 3-year horizon and having specific projects that you want to do over time and making sure that you do one and finish it and then move on to the next and finish it. I think that's the best way that people will be sustained and really have sustainable results with AI.
And you brought out some great examples of polishing content, right? That's a great use case, right? And I find that extremely powerful, and especially in terms of just language, in terms of creating initial structures to improve professional writing and communication within the workplace. I think it's a very powerful tool. What strategies can leaders use to help teams embrace AI as a collaborative tool, right? So, how can they look at it as a positive and an enhancer, like you just talked about in your personal example? How do you think leaders can do this with their teams?
I think the one thing is to talk about. I've a lot of CMO groups that I personally belong to, and I talk about AI often because one, it's something that one I'm passionate about, and I'm passionate about AI and analytics and data. And the first thing is to not be afraid of it and to understand how it can be a complement
Right.
to your work and your work environment. I think that's critical. I think it's up to leaders to say, here's how it adds value to your work and it doesn't diminish you. Here's actually how it makes you better. Here's actually how it's going to help you, be someone that the organization looks at for answers because you have an understanding of how to now go get those answers and understand those patterns better. I have never known a situation where someone didn't come in with better information that people weren't willing to look at. And I think this helps everyone have an opportunity to bring that value of data, information, and insights to businesses to help them perform better and to have better business outcomes.
Lovely. I also think, I mean, just to add to that, I feel that incentivizing and gamifying this, right, in terms of creating simple hackathons, just present your idea in terms of how you could use AI in your life, examples on how you've done it, and acknowledging some of this in forums is very powerful. I love the whole gamification that we have been increasingly doing. And we find a lot of interesting ideas actually come from the floor in terms of how AI can be adopted. So great to hear some of those examples, Jacqueline.
I'll give you one more just really simple example because everyone, I love working with young people because they always like, oh, I have a side hustle and this is my side hustle. And even something as simple as creating like even, kind of the ultimate body butter that you could potentially sell online. Like my daughter does this. She, looked at like what could the formulations be, and she discovered how to do that by using what, Gen AI. And I have to admit, like this little concoction that she has is like, gosh, my skin is smoother. I don't think I need to go buy this from someone else.
Nice.
And so I know it's pretty cool. I'm like, I think this could be a business for you.
I
Um,
know.
but those are things. And when I say democratizing opportunity, I think beyond anything else, it gives us an opportunity to democratize opportunity across many spectrums, whether it be personal or if you work for a company in your business. I think looking at that and seeing, gee, what could I use it for and how could I use it for not just my own gain, but maybe for a business that I'm creating. Those are all ways that I think are going to be tremendously helpful for people and lower the barriers to entry for many businesses.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even just believe that your daughter is so smart to create her own concoction. I mean, I, I,
She's
I'm
got her
scared.
own body. She's got her own body butter that she's made. It is like it smells wonderful. It's like it's like great. So, and I was like shocked. But it's awesome.
Absolutely. Right. In conclusion, what I would like to say is that 67% of business leaders are expecting AI to transform businesses fundamentally. However, 85% of them are seeing data quality as a big barrier to progress, right? That's why we are advising our clients to get their data ready first, and a strong foundation is essential for a successful AI implementation. Lovely to hear Teradata's viewpoints in terms of the vision of recognizing this strong data foundation to really embrace the full potential or reach the full potential of AI. Thank you once again, Jacqueline, for joining us for this podcast. Love the interaction, and it was a pleasure having you, and hope to have you soon as well.
Thank you. It was great.